Miter joints like this are the most typical joints for light-duty frame projects, but they have an Achilles heel. They aren't very strong. That's because all of this end grain soaks up glue, which weakens the joint. But there are lots of ways to strengthen a miter joint, and one of them is by combining a miter joint with a half-lap joint. And Rockler has a jig that enables you to make this joint plus a couple of other half-lap variations on the router table. In this video, we're going to use that jig to make this joint. But first, let's take a closer look at the parts of the joint itself. If I open this joint up, you can see that the parts start off with one piece square and the other piece cut to a 45-degree miter. The square piece gets half of its thickness removed from the front to create a 45-degree shoulder. And the mitered piece gets half of its thickness removed from the back to create a square shoulder. These tongues provide a lot of face grain glue surface area which strengthens the joint. And when they're assembled, the joint shows a half lap on one side, and from the other side, it doesn't. Now let's take a look at the features of Rockler's router table half lap jig to see how it makes joints like this. The jig's base is a large piece of 1/2-inch thick phenolic, which ensures that it'll be smooth, strong, and flat. Underneath, the jig is guided by this 3/8 inch by 3/4 inch aluminum miter bar. It fits into standard router table miter slots, and it has 4 tiny adjuster screws to take out any side-to-side play. That ensures that the jig slides smoothly and accurately. The base has 3 rows of mounting holes, so you can mount the miter bar to suit your router table's miter slot distance to the bit. Rockler's router table half-lap jig requires the use of a 1/2-inch diameter upcut spiral bit, like this, and it's sold separately. When the jig is first set up for use, the bit trims the jig's 1/8 inch thick MDF zero clearance insert to provide an accurate reference edge for setting up routing cuts. 2 of these inserts are included with the jig. The jig has a clear plastic guard to keep your hands safe, and these 2 long rubber overmolded handles provide good solid control when pushing the jig through cuts. Speaking of control, the jig has this adjustable toggle clamp and this second hold down clamp to ensure that workpieces won't shift out of position during cutting. They'll let the jig route stock up to 1 inch thick and 2 3/4 inches wide. Now, as I showed you at the start, routing a mitered half-lap joint involves routing one workpiece at 45 degrees and the other workpiece at 90 degrees. Here's how the jig accommodates these 2 angles. The toggle clamp is mounted to a toggle clamp base that slides back and forth on the jig base and swivels in both directions. It has a long sacrificial wood backer that acts as both a fence and a means of minimizing tear out when workpieces are routed. And now, these 4 blue aluminum registration pins come into play. These 2 registration pins in front enable the toggle clamp base to be set square to the edge of the zero clearance insert. And these 2 registration pins in back enable the toggle clamp base to be swiveled to 45 degrees in this direction and in this direction. 3 of these 4 registration pins have set screws in them, so you can calibrate the jig for the 90-degree and both 45-degree angle positions. That pretty much covers the jig's features, but before we can route our mitered half-lap joint, we have to set the bit height correctly, and here's how to do that. Here's the walnut and maple stock that I plan to use to make a picture frame like this. And here are a couple of test pieces that exactly match the thickness of my picture frame stock. We'll use these to help set bit height. A handy center finder stored in the toggle clamp base makes it easy to find the exact center of the test stock and draw a center line on it. Then, with the test stock resting on the jig base and the jig in position on the router table, I can raise the spiral upcut bit until the top of the cutter just splits the layout line. And now I can make a couple of test cuts. With the jig set to the 90-degree position and both clamps locked down on the test piece, I can route a short rabbet on the end of each test piece by pushing the jig past the bit. And here's what these 2 rabbeted test pieces confirm for us. If the rabbets fit together with no gap in between them in the middle, like this, I know that my router bit will cut to the exact center of my picture frame stock. And that's what I want for a mitered half-lap joint. Now remember, on a mitered half-lap joint, half of the joint is cut square, and the other half of the joint is miter cut at 45 degrees. So on my picture frame, I'm going to miter cut the longer side pieces of the frame, but I'm going to leave the ends of the top and bottom pieces square. And to miter cut those ends, it sure helps to have a big crosscut sled with a large protractor scale and a stop system on the fence, like this sled from Rockler. We're almost ready to route the joint parts, but we still need to lay them out so we know where to remove material and not get confused. I'm going to be removing material from the back face of the mitered workpiece at 90 degrees from this heel. And I'm going to be removing material from the front face of the square workpiece at 45 degrees from this corner. So I mark those waste areas with my squares and add a few X's to avoid confusion. Now at this point, we could go ahead and route either half of the joint. It doesn't really matter. But let's route the mitered half of the joint first. With the jig in the 90-degree position, I can set the joint workpiece against the sacrificial wood backer and adjust it until about 3/8 of an inch of the tip of the mitered end extends beyond the edge of the zero clearance insert. Then I can lock down both clamps. Now I can take the first routing pass to remove the first bit of waste. After that, I'll continue to make more side-by-side passes, removing about 3/8 of an inch of material each time, reclamping the workpiece in place as I go. I'll route my way up to nearly the heel layout line of the miter cut. I've got just a bit more waste to remove to finish up this half of the joint. So I line up my layout line very carefully with the edge of the zero clearance insert and take one final routing pass to route to my layout line. Well, that's it for this half of the joint. And since the other end of this frame workpiece requires the same routing operation, I can go ahead and do that now too. Now the other long side of my picture frame is the mirror opposite of the first one. So I've repeated the whole routing procedure 2 more times on both ends of this one as well. Now we need to route the other half of these mitered half-lap joints. And remember, these cuts are on the square-ended parts, and we're routing at a 45-degree angle to create these diagonal shoulders. So to do that, I'll swivel the toggle clamp base on the jig to 45 degrees in one direction and lock it down with both round knobs. Even though the jig's sacrificial wood backer is now set at an angle, the routing process is the same. I'll extend the joint part about 3/8 of an inch beyond the reference edge of the zero clearance insert each time as I route away progressively more waste, working up to my layout line. Make sure to reclamp the workpiece with both clamps before making each routing pass so it can't slide out of registration when the bit removes the wood. Here again, when I'm routing away the bulk of this waste, I stop just short of my layout line so I can make one final pass, removing that last little bit of waste right to my layout line. Now I can't route the other end of this part with the jig set the same way. I'm going to have to swivel it to 45 degrees in the other direction. But I can route the same end of the matching frame workpiece. So I've gone ahead and done that here. And to route those final 2 ends, I just swivel the jig to the other 45-degree setting and route the workpieces just as I've done for the rest of these cuts. Now if we've done a careful job of routing, these mitered half-lap joints should slip together well. Let's see if they do. Yep, the parts go together to form a nice tight miter, and butt joint, and their faces and edges are flush. But if the seams of the joint don't fit together tightly on the front and the back, you might have to go back and route away a little more waste next to the layout lines. And if the parts don't come together flush, the bit isn't cutting exactly to the center of the workpieces, so you might need to adjust that too. So that's how you use a jig to make mitered half-lap joints. But if you want to make conventional half-lap joints like these, where both workpieces have square ends and meet at 90 degrees, it's easy. Just do all the routing steps with the jig set at 90 degrees. Rockler's router table half-lap jig can help you make beautiful and sturdy mitered picture frames like these quickly and easily. You can see it at your local Rockler store or learn more at rockler.com. A free project plan of this mitered half-lap picture frame can be found at the link on the screen. I'm Chris Marshall with Woodworkers Journal Magazine and Rockler, and thanks for watching.